Hi, my little ones. I am here with you guys a story for tonight. The last story we read was The Little Red Hen. It's my favorite story as a child. Now, the story we're going to read this time is Snow White and Rose Red. And here is this picture that goes along with this first part of the story. You can see Snow White and Rose Red down there. The little animals living in the little tree house. You see the bear up there and whatever that thing is up there. Some kind of wizard maybe? I don't know. We will have to see. So there's the first picture. Snow White and Rose Red by the Brothers Grimm. Once a poor widow lived in a little cottage with a beautiful garden in front. In this garden grew 2 rose trees, one bearing white roses and the other red. And she had 2 children just as lovely. One she called Snow White and the other Rose Red. They were the sweetest, most cheerful, industrious children in the world. Snow White was quieter and more gentle than Rose Red. Rose Red loved to go running through the meadows, picking flowers and chasing butterflies, while Snow White stayed at home with her mother, helping with the housework or reading aloud to her. The 2 children loved each other so dearly that they always walked about hand in hand whenever they went out together, and they promised each other never to live apart and to always share what they had. They often roamed through the forest gathering berries, and no beast ever harmed them. In fact, the animals came to them trustingly. The little white rabbit would nibble a cabbage leaf from their hands. The deer would graze nearby. The stag would bound past them playfully, and the birds perched on the branches would sing to them. Snow White and Rose Red kept their mother's cottage so spotless and neat, it was a pleasure to visit. In summer, Rose Red looked after the house, and every morning before her mother awoke, she placed a bouquet of fresh flowers before her bed with rose from each tree. In winter, Snow White lit the fire and put on the kettle, which was made of brass, but was so beautifully polished it shone like gold. In the evening, when the snowflakes drifted softly down outside, their mother would say, "Snow White, go and bolt the door," and they would gather around the blazing hearth while the mother put on her spectacles and read aloud from a great book. Snow White and Rose Red would sit and listen as they spun. Beside them lay a little lamb, and behind them perched a white dove with its head tucked under its wing. One evening, as they sat cozily together, someone knocked at the door. The mother said, "Rose Red, open the door quickly. It must be some poor traveler in need of shelter." Rose Red unbolted the door and thought she saw a poor man standing in the wintry darkness, but it was no such thing. You can see the picture of the dove and the lamb and the bear sleeping, while Rose Red and Snow White's mom's reading the story. But it was no such thing. It was a bear who poked his huge black head through the doorway. Rose Red screamed and jumped back with terror. The lamb began to belt, the dove flapped its wings, and Snow White ran and hid behind her mother. But the bear began to speak and said, "Please don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. I'm half frozen and only want to warm myself." "Poor bear," replied the mother, "lie down by the fire, only be careful not to singe your fur." Then she called to Snow White and Rose Red to come out. "The bear will not do harm. He is good and honest creature." So they both came out from their hiding places, and gradually the lamb and the dove grew nearer also, and they forgot all about how scary they thought he was. The bear asked if they would beat the snow out of his fur, and they fetched their brooms and swept him clean. Then the beast stretched himself in front of the fire and growled quite happily. In a while the children began to feel comfortable enough to play tricks on him. They tugged at his fur with their hands, but put their small feet on his back and rolled him all over the room, and even beat on him with a hazel stick, laughing when he grumbled. He bore it all good-naturedly, but when they went too far he would cry out, "Leave me my life, you children, Snow White and Rose Red, or you will never wed." When bedtime came and the children were tucked in, the mother said to the bear, "You may sleep here on the hearth if you like, and then you will be safe from the cold." As soon as day broke, the children let the bear out again, and he trotted away over the snow. But every evening thereafter he would arrive at the same hour, and lay down by the hearth, and let the children play their pranks on him. And they were so used to him that the door was always left unbolted until he came. When spring came and all outside was green, the bear said one morning to Snow White, "Now I must go away and not come back for a whole summer." "But where are you going, dear bear?" asked Snow White. "I must go to the wood to protect my treasures from the wicked dwarfs. In winter the earth is frozen hard, and they are forced to remain underground, because they can't work their way through. But now when the sun has thawed and warmed the ground, they break through and come up to spy and to steal what they can. What once falls into their hands and into their caves is rarely recovered." Snow White was very sad to see him go, and opened the door so slowly that the bear, stepping out, caught a piece of fur in the doorway. She thought she saw some glittering gold beneath his coat, but she couldn't be sure, because he ran away so quickly and soon disappeared into the wood. A short time after this, the mother sent the children into the wood to gather sticks. And as they wandered, they came upon a big tree which was lying across the path. On the trunk, among the tall grass, they noticed something jumping up and down, but they couldn't tell what it was. When they came closer, they saw a dwarf, with an old wrinkled face and a snow-white beard 1 yard long. The end of his beard was stuck in the split of the tree, and the little man kept jumping about like a dog on a chain, for he couldn't get his beard free. He glared at the children with his red fiery eyes and screamed, "Why are you just standing there? Aren't you going to help me?" "What are you doing, little man?" asked Rose Red. "You stupid goose," he yelled. "I was chopping wood for my kitchen and had driven a wedge into the log just right. But the wedge came flying out, and the log closed so quickly on my beautiful beard that it got caught, and now I can't get it out. Don't you laugh at me, you milk-faced things. What's the matter with you?" The children tried as carefully as they could to pull the dwarf's beard out, but it was too firmly trapped. "I'll run to get help," suggested Rose Red at last. "Blockheads! What good would that do? You're already too many for me right now. Can't you think of anything else?" complained the dwarf. "Don't be so impatient," replied Snow White. "I have an idea." And pulling her scissors from her pocket, she cut off the end of the beard. As soon as the dwarf found himself free, he snatched up a bag full of gold that was hidden among the roots of the tree, and marched off muttering, How dare they cut off a piece of my beautiful beard? Brats! With that he swung his bag over his shoulder and disappeared without so much as looking back. Shortly after this, Snow White and Rose Red went fishing, and they neared the pond. They saw what looked like a great grasshopper springing toward the water as if it were going to jump in. They ran up and recognized their old friend the dwarf. "What are you doing?" asked Rose Red. "You will fall into the water." "I'm not that stupid," the little man yelled. "Can you see that fish is trying to drag me in?" The dwarf had been sitting there fishing when the wind had entangled his beard with the fishing line, and so when a great fish bit at the bait, the little fellow did not have the strength to pull in the fish, and the fish began to get the best of him. The dwarf held on to the reeds and rushes, but that was no help. The fish dragged him where he liked, closer and closer to the water. Luckily, just then the children arrived and tried to get the old dwarf's beard out of the fishing line. But beard and line were too entangled, so Snow White pulled out her scissors again and snipped off another piece of the beard. When the dwarf saw what she had done, he went into a rage and exclaimed, "You donkey, you've disfigured me! It's bad enough you cut it before, but now you've cut it off the best part. I don't dare show my face to my own people. I wish I'd never laid eyes on you." Then he took up a bag of pearls which lay among the rushes, and without speaking another word slipped off and disappeared behind a rock. Soon after this adventure, the mother sent the children to town to buy threads, needles, lace, and ribbons. The path led through a great meadow on which there were large boulders lying about. Just overhead they saw a huge bird flying round and round, and every now and then dropping lower and lower, till at last it swooped behind a rock. Immediately afterwards they heard a sharp, piercing cry. They ran up with fright to find that the bird had caught their old friend the dwarf, and was about to carry him off. The tender-hearted children grabbed the little man and held on to him till the bird gave up the struggle and flew off. As soon as the dwarf recovered from his fright, he yelled in his squeaking voice, "Couldn't you hold me more gently? You've torn my nice new coat to pieces, meddling and interfering rubbish that you are." With these words he shouldered a bag of precious stones and huffed off to the tree among the rocks. The children were used to his ungrateful attitude by now and continued to town to run their errands. Coming home, they returned by the same way they came upon the dwarf pouring out his precious stones in an open space, for he thought no one would be walking by so late in the day. The setting shone of the sun on the glittering stones, and they gleamed and sparkled so beautifully that the children stood and stared. "What are you staring at?" he yelled. All his Asian gray face became red with rage, and he was screaming at the poor children. A sudden growl was heard, and a great black bear came out of the forest. The dwarf jumped up in terror, but the bear was too close to escape. "Spare me, Mr. Bear," the dwarf cried. "I'll give you all my treasure. See these beautiful stones which lie here? Only give me my life. Why, I'm hardly a snack for you. See these two wicked girls? Take them. They would make a nice morsel, as fat as quails. Eat them, for heaven's sake." But the bear, not bothering to reply, simply gave the bad-mannered dwarf a single blow with his paw, and the dwarf never stirred again. The girls were going to run away, but the bear called to them, "Snow White and Rose Red, don't be afraid. Wait, and I'll come with you." They recognized his voice and stopped when the bear came. His rough coat suddenly fell off, and a handsome young man stood beside them, all dressed in gold. "I am a king's son," he said, "and I was condemned by that wicked dwarf, who stole all my treasure, to wander about in this forest. in the form of a bear until his death released me from the spell. Now he has received his well-deserved punishment. Snow White married him, and Rose Red married his brother, and they divided the great treasure the dwarf had collected in his old tree between them. The mother lived for many years peacefully with her children, and the rose trees which had stood before the cottage were planted now before her palace window, and every year they bore the finest red and white roses. And here's a picture of Snow White and the king's son, the prince, who turned from a bear into a prince, and you see the treasure down here. See all the gold? See, his bear suit fell off and he turned into a prince. And they lived happily ever after. The next story that we'll get to read is The Unseen Giant. Sounds very interesting. So I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's story, Snow White and Rose Red. Good night, my little sleepyheads. I hope you have sweet dreams. God bless you all. Good night, little ones.